We've gotten our scanner all set up, it's connected and ready to scan. The next thing we need to do back on our computer is to open up our scan software. There's two slightly different options for how we go about this, and they're almost identical, so we'll look at both. For the first option, let's go into our Finder. Up in the menu bar, I'll click on Go and select Applications. And from there, we're looking for an application called Image Capture. So I'm just going to type in IMA, and it's going to jump in our alphabetical list to that application. Now I'll just double click and we'll open up our scanning software. Let's go ahead and look at the other method of opening up our scan software, and that is through Photoshop. So I'll open up Photoshop, and from the Photoshop menu bar, I can click File, Import, and select Images from Device. Now you can see I'm getting a warning that the scanner is being used by another application. In our case, that's Image Capture, which we just opened up. All the settings are going to be exactly the same, regardless of whether you scan through Photoshop or through Image Capture. The only exception is if we are scanning through Photoshop, we have the option down here in the lower left of creating a new Photoshop document automatically, or creating a new layer in a document we're already working in. So this is a nice way to work if you're already working in Photoshop and you want to bring in some imagery into a composition. For now, let's just close out of here and go back to Image Capture. And we'll take a look at some of the settings. Now, ideally what you'd like to see when you open up Image Capture is this 3-column layout, and that's going to give you access to all the advanced settings that you might need. Sometimes when you first open up Image Capture, you'll see a less detailed group of settings where we have just a main preview area and the column over on the left showing the devices that we are communicating with. If that's the case, just come down here to the lower right and click on Show Details, and we'll get all the different settings that we'd like to have access to. So the scanner gives us a preview of what's on the scanning bed, and then some settings for how we'd like the scanner to capture our imagery. So starting from the top here, we have the scan mode. In our case, we're going to be doing flatbed. That's for scanning opaque objects. We can scan in color, or black and white, which is actually grayscale, text, which is a true either black or white. So let's leave that on color because I like to capture all the color info that I can. We can set the number of colors to millions or billions, and this corresponds to how much information we're asking each pixel to hold. So for our case here, millions should be just fine. In other cases, you might want more. Now, resolution is the size of the pixel that we're capturing. So the higher the resolution, the more detail we're going to be able to capture of the things that we're scanning. If I click the drop down here, I can see a range of different resolutions, the lowest being 50 and the highest being 6400. So in general, the lower resolutions around 72 or 96 or 150, those are going to be good for things that will only exist on a screen. If we are making something that is going to be higher quality, for example, if it's something that needs to be printed, we might want to take that resolution higher. Something like 300 would be pretty good. Likewise, if we want to scan something that is physically small and blow it up larger, we want that resolution to be higher. So I'm going to bump this up to, let's say, 720. That's going to give us a nice, really high-res scan. We could even then take some of these images and enlarge them a little bit without losing detail. Now, the size of the scan is something that we need to set over in the preview column of our interface, and we do that just by clicking and dragging. And you can see I am making these selection boxes around my preview image. So I can click and drag and move those around. I can grab the little corner handles and I can enlarge them. I could even rotate. So if I hadn't set that up quite square to the scanning bed, that's a useful thing. So if I just wanted to scan that image of the dog, I could select just that part and the scanner is going to ignore everything else on the bed. I can also click and drag additional areas to scan, and those will save out as separate individual files. So right now, this would make 3 separate images. If I want everything all together, I can just click and drag over the entire bed, or use the keyboard shortcut Command A to select everything all at once. If you find that you're accidentally making additional selection boxes that you don't want, you can simply click on the center and click delete on the keyboard, and then your selection will go away. Now, in order to actually scan anything, we need to make sure we have at least one selection box going. So I'll go ahead and just click and drag over this entire bed, and we'll make this all one composition. Back to the settings, I want to make sure that I specify where my scan is going to end up. So this is another place that difference between scanning through Photoshop and scanning through image capture comes up. In this case, we're going to be making a file that's going to save to somewhere on our computer. Right now this is set to downloads. That's fine as long as I know where it's going. I'm going to give this a descriptive name. Usually, if you're working in a computer lab, you want to put your name in the file name and then something descriptive. And then we can set our format. So here we get different options for the type of image file we'd like to capture. In my case, I'm going to leave this on TIFF since I want a relatively high resolution file coming out of this. And depending on which format I select and how many of these selection boxes I have in the preview window, I have the option to combine all of those into a single document, for example, with a TIFF or a PDF. Now I've got some editing options here that will automatically filter my scan. I generally like to leave these set to none and do edits myself in Photoshop, but if you'd like to play with some of these, you can do things like sharpen the image and remove dust and things like that. Once we've got all our settings set up and we have selected the part or parts of the image that we'd like to scan, all I need to do is go ahead and click Scan down in the lower right, and our scanner is going to go ahead and scan. And once the scan is finished, I'll get this little pop-up window with the scan results with a shortcut to the file that I just scanned. So if I click the little magnifying glass icon next to that, that'll take me into the folder where I saved my file, and I can see here this is my separate scan file. Okay, that's a quick overview of how to use a flatbed scanner.